Earlier this year, Tommy Politz concluded a 19-year ministry as senior pastor of Hillside Christian Church in Amarillo, Texas, and passed the baton to longtime staff member Jonathan Mast. Together, they have both been instrumental in creating a healthy, high-impact culture of health and growth. As Tommy and Jonathan share with us this morning, let's welcome and honor them for exemplifying a healthy pastoral transition and ministry relationship.
Well, hey, I want to thank Spire and specifically Gene Apple for the invitation to come and speak on team and culture development, and we're grateful to be able to do that. When he invited me, the first thing I thought was, I really want to do this session and lead out in this session with our former senior pastor, our pastor emeritus and teaching pastor at our church. And so we have, over the last 19 years, worked in team to develop a really imperfect but healthy staff culture. And so I knew I wanted to do this with him. He's also one of my best friends. And I went to him and I said, hey, Tommy, I want to lead this session with you. And he said, no, man, we've led in team. It's your time. Just do it yourself. And I said, I don't want to do that. That's not who we are. I said, I really want to lead this in team. And he goes, no, man, it just needs to be you. And I thought, I need to try a different approach. So I said, excuse me, who is the senior pastor?
I said, thank you, may I have another?
And so we are here to talk about together what it looks like, and specifically 3 pillars to building a healthy team culture. 3 pillars to building a healthy team culture. The first one is theological trust. There needs to be theological trust and alignment. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 2 and 3 says, preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season to correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction, for the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. We have to have theological trust, but then also there's strategic trust. Strategic trust. This reminds me of when Jethro in Exodus 18 goes and he talks to his son-in-law Moses. And he says, hey, I have some observations, as father-in-laws do. He said in Exodus 18, verse 17 and 18, Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourself out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Some of you walked into the conference at the beginning of the week and you knew and you felt that the work was too heavy for you. You were tired and exhausted, ready to throw in the towel because you felt the weight of the work. But here's what's so true. Jethro doesn't say to Moses that the work is too heavy. He says it's too heavy for you alone. It's just too heavy for you all by yourself. And so he says strategic trust, right? Here's what I need you to do. I need you to teach people's God's decrees, and then I need you to gather up qualified people to handle and empower and make decisions so that every decision comes to you. And then you have relational trust. Over 50 times in the New Testament, we see these words, one another. One of those is bear one another's burdens. I don't even know how you know somebody has a burden unless there's some level of relational trust.
Yeah, and so when you talk about these, the top you notice is theological trust. You don't really want to work in a place where you don't have theological trust, which is going to involve both doctrinal integrity and doctrinal alignment. Doctrinal integrity being biblical doctrine, sound doctrine, like 2 Timothy chapter 4, but then also alignment, especially on primary issues and even secondary issues. Now, tertiary issues are different, right? I mean, when you lay out and you're thinking about your doctrine and, hey, do I even really have alignment with this team or this particular culture? And all of our churches, I think, have that, whether it has been formally stated or not. But when you can clarify it, it really helps to build theological trust. And that's what drives and helps buy-in at the strategic level and also at the relational level. There are doctrines to die for, doctrines to divide over, doctrines to debate about, and doctrines to decide on. And you know when you have theological liberalism because you've got like a first order issue that you're driving all the way down to the tertiary third order issues, and you just basically take something that you should be willing to say, hey, I would divide over that, I'd split over that because it is a major orthodox theological issue. And when you don't, then it just gets spread. That's how you get to theological liberalism. But you get to theological legalism when you take these third order issues that you're supposed to talk about, debate about, decide on, and you drive it all the way up to a first order issue, and you're like, nope, if you're gonna be on this staff, you're gonna be a part of this culture, you have to hold to this. Kind of like earlier when Shane Phillips was talking about, hey, the culture of you don't dance because it leads to sex, you're not gonna play cards, right, because it leads to gambling, and it's you don't dance, you don't dance, you don't play cards, you don't smoke, you don't chew, and you don't run with girls who do. That old expression that you sometimes hear people, well, that's because you're driving it up and making it a legalistic issue. You've driven a third order issues all the way up. And when you're developing trust on the theological front or side, a staff culture, whether we've communicated or not, that's at the top of the pyramid. Then you've got these other parts and components that are impacted as a result.
Yes, you have theological trust and then strategic trust, and that has to do with ministry philosophy, why we do what we do and how that is going to play out, but it's really the why and the what. Then ministry operations has to do with staffing systems and structures. It's the how we do what we do, but really neither one of those are where we want to focus today. We don't want to focus on theological trust or strategic trust. When it comes to this, we really want to focus on relational trust, and here's why. Here's why. This is so important. When teams have strong theological trust and dynamic strategic trust, leaders are prone to overlook the importance of relational trust. Let me say that again. When teams have strong theological trust and dynamic strategic trust, leaders are prone to overlook the importance of relational trust.
Yeah, so we were discussing this in the preparation for our talk about over the years, let's recount the stories where we had to reset because we had relational health drift. Whether it was at the directional team level or it was driven further down into our church, across any of our campuses, where do we see, and let's begin with the directional team, and oftentimes, Jonathan and I, over the last 19 years, and really the last 11 to 12 years, we've really been co-leading the church together. And in doing that, we had to identify even ourselves, where do we see that we could say, hey, we have had a real tendency to drift in these areas. So it does create, again, those crucial conversations that become very necessary to maintain the health. And so we discussed that there were 3 of these areas. And by the way, it's interesting how we don't have a tendency to drift towards health, right? It'd be great. Wouldn't it be amazing if you drifted towards the gym instead of drifting towards the couch to tackle that half-gallon of Tillamook ice cream and show it who's boss? I don't know about you, but it's like I don't drift to the gym. I drift to things that maybe aren't necessarily as healthy. And we were discussing how in our team culture, we saw the relational drift and trust 3 major ways. One was flawed assumptions. We just assumed we had it. You just assume that you have it when you might not. The second was neglect through momentum. Theological trust and strategic trust carries us oftentimes through difficulty or through obstacles. Success has a way of pushing you through barriers and obstacles until it doesn't. It's like the success just seems to be a catalyst right up into the point where maybe it's not. And then the third we talked about was leadership fatigue. Just as we all get in a busy season, or it's really the exhaustion of repetitive reminders, right? You get tired of even reminding yourself or reminding others. It's kind of like parents in a home. This isn't just in the workplace, but in the home culture where you know the right thing that you need to do, and there's been so much repetition of reminding of the drift that you get fatigued of doing anymore, so you just let it slide. You let it go with the kids, you let it go with the culture or the temperature in your household. The same thing happens in time at work. Yeah, so what we want to do is we just want to come alongside and say, hey, there's
of several things that we have narrowed down and just want to say, when it comes to developing a healthy team culture, these are things that have just worked for us. And so we just want to share some things, 6 things that have worked for us over the years. And the first one is this, lead with questions, not statements. Lead with questions, not statements. Oftentimes, I think when we're leading and we're giving direction to people, we fall into the category of leading with statements and not questions. And at our church, a distinctive is we want to see spiritual growth happen by leading with questions, not making statements. And this is so important. Some of the most tension-filled moments in the Gospels are when Jesus asks a question. Jesus asked so many great questions. When he's standing in John chapter 18, 2 questions before the high priest, 1 before Pontius Pilate. He asked 3 questions in that chapter. He asked questions like, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? Questions. If Jesus led through questions, I'm just saying maybe I should and we should lead with questions. And I see that over and over again. There's this power in being able to ask really good questions. After all, I want to be led with questions, not statements. I think our spouses want to be led with questions, not statements. Our kids, for sure, our coworkers. And we often ask ourselves, are these the best questions to ask? I wish coming out of that meeting, I could have asked a bigger and better question.
Yeah, second one we talked about that has been part of our reset often, or if we experience some type of relational drift in health, is to confront competing subcultures. Every church has like a main culture or a mission critical culture that you're serious about, you're protecting, it's part of who you are. And there are subcultures that are created sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. And the distinction here is confronting competing subcultures, but celebrating collaborative ones. It's important, I think, to allow for there to be subculture in a church, because that's where the innovation and creativity comes from. That's where you really do see sometimes that you're heading in a one particular direction and you're gonna steer things in a new direction or a different direction. The distinction here, or the tension, becomes when too many subcultures or a deep enough one penetrates and gets critical mass, you end up with we, they language. And it's, well, we this, but they this. It could be one campus about another. It could be students about the children's team or children's team about guest services, right? Or one of the worst is when we see that it's the staff and the elders and the we, they language that can percolate up to the top, can create a lot of tension. The thing that we always ask ourselves is alignment and autonomy. A collaborative subculture has alignment with autonomy, but a competing subculture has autonomy without alignment. You need some of that freedom to be able to challenge the process, to be able to strengthen and grow a culture. And one of the things that's so unique about Christianity, think about what Jesus did. Jesus called us to be countercultural. Romans chapter 12 says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So part of being a faithful Christian is we're gonna live counterculturally. The gospel's constantly, John's reminding us, hey, you're in the world, but don't be of the world. So we have this mission together, all of us, where we're living counterculturally and going against mainstream culture, but then we gotta come together in such a way to be aligned. And I think about that statement yesterday with glue, when we're all taking the survey and the top 2 things that came up, the biggest issues were team and finances. And you looked at how overwhelming the team portion was or is, and I think it gets easy, again, through leadership fatigue, to not ever want to address the competing subcultures that exist there. I know over the years at Hillside, and I could speak for me, he's been our senior pastor now for 6 months, but during my tenure, there were times where the biggest issue at Hillside was me, because I was, I always would say this, hey, what I permit, I promote. And if I wouldn't address something because I got tired, I might as well have gotten a megaphone and shouted it from the top. You can behave like this, or you can do this. And it was really on me to be the first one to say, hey, I have messed up and have not been willing to address this area. And competing subcultures often come from what you have promoted.
Yeah, the third thing we want to look at is embrace policy avoidance. Embrace policy avoidance. And all we mean by that is just simply this. The gravitational pull as you grow is to create more policies, and you believe, hey, it's going to make us more efficient and more effective when we do that. And there's really two reasons why we have been tempted to create a policy. One is we felt like something needed to be set as an expectation. We thought it was good and healthy, and we went ahead and did that. The second temptation we experience is this: when a staff member does something really dumb, and we just are exhausted and we don't want to actually deal with it again, and so we think, man, if we could just create a policy, maybe that would prevent that thing from happening in the future. It's so interesting how that works, because typically some of those reactionary policies always are attached to a person. Some of you have been tempted over the years to create a social media policy, and really it should have been called a Brad social media policy, because Brad's the one that caused it, right?
That's right.
I'm sorry I used somebody who's in the room from our team. It's a little awkward. So the reality, though, is, not you, buddy. Here's what's so true. Policies are not bad, we have them. They're not bad, we have them. We're saying, try to avoid them at all cost. Just try to avoid them at all cost. And here's why. We've built so much trust around this one idea, because deep down inside, we want spiritual growth, and we know spiritual growth comes by the sanctification and work of the Holy Spirit within someone, not the policies we place around someone. And we wanted them to get and really lean into. We do a lot of staff trainings around this. Hey, use discernment and influence. And for every policy we create, we are limiting somebody's growth when it comes to their own discernment and their influence. Hey, that thing I'm about ready to say or post or do, does that grow my influence or not? Is that really a wise, discerning decision to make in the moment? And so when we have people who staff or volunteers make a bad decision, we take the time to have a conversation, not use the time to write another policy.
Which can be very inefficient, which is the next thing. Effectiveness trumps efficiency. Effective trumps efficiency. It doesn't ignore it. Relational trust isn't built through efficiency. Relationships, they're not efficient, and you know that. Management author and guru Peter Drucker said efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things. One of the things we've attempted over the years, we have done it imperfectly so, but it's when it comes to our meetings, our cultural tilt leans in the direction of effectiveness instead of efficiency at Hillside. It's good to chase rabbits. It's okay to not feel like you're always automatons on autopilot trying to be as effective, as efficient as possible at every turn. And that has really tied in a lot to the culture.
Fifth thing is this: team teaching, team leadership, team decision-making, team transition. In the context of how we do ministry, we want it to be about team leadership, from the plurality of voices on a weekend platform to student ministry to children's ministry. We want that to seep so deep into the culture of our church. Team leadership and team decision-making, you're like, well, they're one and the same. Not really. Team decision-making is pushing decisions to other people, other staff member and volunteers to be able to make those decisions and truly empower people. And then team transition. 6 months ago, we did a senior pastor transition. A couple years before that, an executive pastor transition. There's somebody key in our finance team that we're transitioning to a different role right now. All of that, we really want to do that in team, because it really matters to us and it matters in our culture.
Yeah, we often remind ourselves that this is about health, not perfection. Health, not perfection. Auto-correcting is hard. When you have the health drift, to be able to, again, have the crucial conversations that are necessary. Two big ones we talk about is professional justifiers. It's easy for us to be professional justifiers and really justify our own behaviors, but also progress addiction. It's in ministry, over the years, the temptation to be a progress addict. And I think Dr. Alexander was explaining that earlier, right? All of that sense of identity gets into us based on things always needing to move up and to the right. And instead, I think it's good for us to rest in being a child of God, but that has to drive deep so that you can empower others. You can give opportunity away. And the thing that I love that has been one of the most encouraging things is when I see that every person in our culture owns this. Every person owns it. It's not just at a directional team level that leads it and bleeds it, but when it gets all the way through and you see more of a flatarchy of truly a flatter organization that's decentralized, where people are leading and bleeding and they really, really definitely believe in and desire and hunger for health.
These are just a few things that have worked for us over the years. And I hope you can take them. Maybe you adopt a few, maybe you don't adopt any of them, and that's fine. The real purpose is this: when you have strong theological trust and dynamic strategic trust, please don't overlook the importance of relational trust. And I would say this, because it matters. It really matters to a church looking to your staff going, how do we navigate healthy relationship? It matters to the mission that Christ has called your church to. It matters to the joy that we have in ministry, because let's be honest, it's not all about what we do. Some of it's about who we get to do it with. It matters for so many different reasons. It matters for your longevity in ministry, that the weight is too heavy and you don't carry it all by yourself. It matters because the God-sized vision He has placed in your heart will not be accomplished by just you, but by a team of people driving for and expecting a healthy team culture. Thank you.